Okay, welcome everybody. I'm using the mic because we have some people on Zoom too, so we want to make sure that they also hear us. So again, I want to welcome you and thank you all for being here. Enjoy the videos, but we also enjoy the amazing testimonios. And so we're going to have our facilitators, Paola and Gigi, lead this conversation, but we also have amazing panelists here. And the purpose of this is for us to kind of create awareness and educate ourselves as to how much it is, how important it is to share our stories and feel that we are part of our community as we celebrate the Latino, Latina, Latin heritage. So I'm gonna give it up for sorry, Paola and Denise.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paola Sanchez, and I am a DEBER Scholar, and I'm so excited for this conference.
Hello, everybody. Me llamo Denise Rodriguez. I am the peer mentor for the DEBER here at Mesa. I'm looking forward to hearing from our amazing panelists. These panelists were exclusively selected by the DEBER Scholars, people who are part of the program and believe that these professors, administrative personnel are worth telling their story. And storytelling is a way for us to, build community, come in solidarity, and building solidarity in this community, encourages solidarity, but it also encourages allyship among racial and ethnic groups. I think this panel, you'll find that it's very inclusive and it is very cultural oriented. I did want to ask the first question though. I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves and kind of share a little bit about themselves. It can be their education, their careers, any social identity, and just anything that you feel comfortable sharing with us.
Okay, so I guess we're going on. So first of all, before I begin, good afternoon, it's great to see you here. Also, I want to take a very quick moment to thank the band and to thank the students and the organizers for this, for inviting me to be a part of this. It's great to be a part of this conversation, and I'm excited to be able to share some of my stories with you and maybe have a conversation with you as well. My name is Manuel Perez. I am a professor here at San Diego Mesa College as part of the Chicanx program. I've been here at San Diego Mesa College since 2007. So that's a long time officially. It's close to 20 years, and I've been a part of the Chicanx program here. Prior to that, I was a English professor at Boston Community College in Boston, Texas. And I taught there for 5 years before I came over here to teach Chicanx specifically. I am a product of the community college also. I'm sure I'm not the only one here for the panelists, but I started off also as a student in Boston Community College in Boston, because right after high school, I did not have a lot of opportunities for the university level. I wasn't a smart kid at the university. I didn't take my SATs or my ACTs. So the only option that I had, if I wanted to go on to college, was at Boston Community College. And like all community colleges, luckily the Boston Community College admitted everyone. And so having that opportunity, I started at BCC. I got enough grades, enough courses to transfer. I ultimately transferred to the University of Texas at El Paso, where I got a degree in theater arts specifically. And then at UTEP, I also studied for a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. And that's an interesting degree program at UTEP, because even though it's a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, it focuses specifically on bilingual writing. And so it brings in writers who either from Mexico or writers from the United States, or writers who are writing both in Spanish and English, and focuses particularly on that. So that was a good experience for me, primarily because that's what I wrote, and that's the language that I speak Spanish, I speak that whole. So having been able to study at a university with that language for me was awesome. So I have my MFA from the University of Texas at El Paso. And again, as I mentioned, I'm currently a Chicanx professor. One more time, I'll pass it.
Thank you so much, and thank you also to the event for inviting us to participate in this panel. About like student Georgina Benedict, so I'm very excited to be here. My name is Alessandra Moctezuma, and I'm a professor in fine art. I'm in charge of the Museum Studies program, which we have a very unique Museum Studies program here in Santiago Mesa College. I also teach a class, Chicano Art for Chicano Studies. So I'm also very closely connected to our Chicano Studies department. And I've been at Mesa since 2001. So I've been here for a long time. And I love it. You know, every day I come to work, just joyful and very happy to do what I do. I'm also the director of the art gallery, which is a beautiful art gallery on campus, and I have the opportunity to train artists to show in our space. My background is I actually immigrated to the United States when I was a teenager. We went to Los Angeles, where I perfected my English. So I understand the experience of being an immigrant, and that's very much part of how I think and how I connect with a lot of art students who also might come from different cultures, different backgrounds, different experiences. I also was a good student, but I was for a while undocumented. And so the only avenue for me to actually go to college was community college, because at that time in the late 80s, it was if you could go to community college, no questions asked. If you just brought your high school diploma, you got it. So I went to Santa Monica College, and I think out of my whole educational experience, even my master's, even when I was doing my doctorate study, Santa Monica College, I had the best professors. I had the best experience. I made wonderful friends. So it's by choice in a way that I'm here at our community college, because I feel that had the greatest impact in my life. I see myself as both Mexican, Latina, Chicana, and I really discovered my Chicana identity by working with muralist Judy Baca in Los Angeles. So I did my studies in art, and then I was able to work with her and that me to teach in the arts and to teach Chicano studies.
Good afternoon, buenas tardes. Para mí es un privilegio estar aquí. Mi nombre es Linda Sotelo, Linda Elizabeth Sotelo Gilbert, and I am part of the DEBER. I'm the administrative coordinator for the program, for the project, and it's an honor to be here. I am a native of San Diego, but I did live in Texas for almost 13 years. And so I started my educational journey at Southwestern College when I was 22. And I thought that was late. I thought it was too late to go back to college. But I was 22 when I went back to school. I was married, I had 2 kids. And I continued my educational journey in Texas, my bachelor's in San Antonio, and then my master's in Houston. And so I've been working in higher education for almost 17 years. And I love supporting the development of new programs, supporting the students. Especially when they make a positive impact. When I first graduated from college, I worked at SDG&E, the utilities and rebate programs, and I loved what I did, but I wasn't passionate. And that passion came back when I started working in higher ed. So I'm grateful to be here. I consider myself a lifelong learner. Like I said, I started at Southwestern College, but I continued in Texas. I know I'm not done. I want to do research in the need to educate the whole child. And I am now 43 years old, been married for 25 years, have 3 kids. I have 1 kid in Texas at the Hano, and I'm going to soon be a grandma. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you for having us.
Hello. Oh, those feels you're talking. Even though I'm a professor, I always still kind of get a little nervous talking to groups of people that I don't know. So for the first time, it always was kind of weird. So I'm Professor Michael Wicker. I started my journey into education. It was kind of strange. Actually was a shipyard worker. I went to high school, and I was a pipe fitter. I worked in Long Beach and a whole bunch of other shipyards around here. I got injured, and that's how I ended up working in the school. So I was an elementary school teacher for about 10 years, and primarily worked with Eastern Farmers to this stuff. At the time, I was living in San Diego, and my wife chose. And we're going to move down to Chula Vista to start a family because she thought that was a more family-oriented place. And it really, although I was resistant at first, it really gave me the sense of community to live in a community where I taught. And then in 2007, I was hired to come over at Southwestern College, which professor. And then I started taking on the issue with the education program and how to build that. One of the things that I found is that education made a really huge difference in life. I was one of those people where school is a safe space for me to go. I grew up in a very chaotic home, abuse, drugs, alcohol, a lot of gangs in the neighborhood. I used to live in South San Diego or in Sherman and Shoptown. And my brother's actually from 38th Street, so a lot of gang related stuff from our family. When I married my wife, ironically, I married into Norteños. So Sureños down here, and they're all Norteños. And yes, there was actually a fight in my wedding. And so coming from that kind of a background, but also a background in graffiti and hip hop and all of that, where actually you see a lot of people come together from different backgrounds through art and music and things. It's all been part of this defining who I am and what I become as a teacher. And so becoming part of the DEBER was really, really important. When I was around 15, I got into some trouble, 14, 15, got into some trouble, took off and went to Jalisco for a while. And then when I came back, they came back and they're like, oh, we got to put you in ESL classes and all that. And I was like, hey, but don't you remember me? I was here last year and I was in ESL classes. And so, the way bilingual education and ESL and things like that used to be back in the 80s has changed a bit, and I'm really proud to be part of the DEBER to help develop these educators, just consciously minded people. We're going to do so that they don't have those kinds of things happening again. So yeah, there's me. I can just run around, but that's in there. So I'll pass it on down.
Well, thank you for everyone for sharing your experiences. Each one of you are like a great example. Your testimonials are so far great and interesting how most of you decided to go to community college. Like you can all relate to that and have a connection. So thank you so much. Our next question is, what are some of the ways that you have decided to define yourself or your career differently than what others may have expected of you? And how have you used your voice to speak for yourself and others?
Yes. Right down the road.
Unless you want to go out. You want to
We'll do that next.
Okay.
So I think for me, with this question, I think the strongest way the thing that's happened to me that most has helped to define me is something that I would call concientización, or regaining a consciousness. And that's something that happened to me at a young age. I was probably about maybe 16, 17 years old when I started to become very conscious about what it meant to be Chicanx and what it meant to be working class and what it meant to be to have parents who were farm workers. And definitely what it felt like to grow up in a place where I was not certainly welcome, or my culture or my community was not seen as a part of the community or the culture itself. I grew up in Salinas, California, moved to Central California And there's definitely a strong Chicano culture there, but growing up as, I was the child of immigrants. Both my mom and my dad, came from Mexico. They got married in Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico. They decided to go to California for their honeymoon, and they stayed there. Right, that's how much, they had just come into the country. And so by the time I was born into a very, very Mexican family. I always say that I grew up in, you might call the most stereotypical Chicano way possible. Right? My parents were farm workers. I was bilingual growing up. We were Católicos, we were a working class family. We were on Sundays, tamales for Christmas. I mean, think about the most stereotypical Chicano, and that was my experience growing up. But what that was for me was it was definitely a sharp contrast between that and the rest of the society. Right? It was clear to me that walking out of my house, I was no longer a part of that community. Right? My community extended to the inside of my house, where we all spoke Spanish, practiced the same culture. It extended to those people who came to my house. My father's and my mom's compadres and comadres, right? Or tios and tias, right? That's where my culture and where I felt the most comfortable. Stepping outside of that house, it was different. And you could feel it, or I could feel it certainly. And I knew that in many ways, I was not a part of that society. I know it's difficult, probably for your generation to think about it, but I never felt like an American. I never. I've never looked at myself and said, I'm an American, because that's never the way that I was accepted in society, and it's never what I was told was the definition of an American. I spoke Spanish, I came from a working class family, it was bilingual, so on and so forth. That didn't fit the American identity. So I was really conscious of that, I think, growing up by the time I was 15, 16 years old. Aside from that, growing up in Salinas, California in the 1970s, the Chicano movement really had a major impact. And growing up in the 70s in the Central California area, the word Chicano was very common. And it was, in many ways, for me, the first word that I identified with, right? The very first time someone said, "Who are you?" Chicano was the very first answer that I gave, right? And it wasn't for me, Alessandra mentioned that she started identifying herself as Chicano when she worked with Judy Vaca. Most Chicano students will tell you that they gained their Chicanismo or their identity after taking a class, right? Which is true. But I come from a generation where we were born Chicano. And that kind of sounds like, oh, born Chicano. Right, but I think in generation where Chicano permeated every part of the society. It wasn't only talked about within the militant community, it was talked about in popular culture. We saw it on television, the show like Chico and Man, right? Chicano was everywhere. And so when I started to become conscious of an identity, it wasn't an American identity, it was a Chicano identity. And so again, that for me created this moment of concientización. Right, I love to read, and I devoured novels and books and everything as I was growing up. But when I was 13 years old, I walked into the public library in Salinas, California, and I ran into a section called La Raza section, which I had never seen before. Right, I spent so much time in libraries. I had never seen a section dedicated just simply to writers writing about my culture, my history, my experiences, and I devoured the books in that section. And so that really was the connection for me between my understanding of who I was as a person and connecting that to a larger culture and understanding the political realities of that. Again, I'm like 15, 16 years old, right? But all these things are happening in a lot of ways from that moment, right? From the time I was 16, 15 years old, I think I was searching for a way to either represent that voice that I was reading, be a part of that voice that I was reading, or at least express or share that voice that I was reading. I think that's what's driven me mostly to become who I am today. I could tell more, but again, I'll stop so that others can answer.
This is a hard question to answer for sure. I think my path and the way I see myself and my role is a little bit different. I came here as an immigrant, so it was very isolating. In a lot of the spaces that I was in, a lot of the schools that I was in, I was a lot of times the only woman Latina in many of my classes. I didn't have that sense of community that you might have if you're from here and you grew up in a neighborhood. So that was interesting and it was difficult. And it was also paired with a lot of assumptions of who I was, by the way, because I had that accent or because I looked a certain way. So people assumed that I was this or that. And so I had to really figure out how to define myself. I was an extremely shy person too. In high school, I like never raised my hand, never spoke. But I very much felt an outsider. But because I was an artist, it also allowed me to observe and to look and to learn. And I realized that coming from a different culture, coming from a different perspective, gave me a certain superpower, right? Because you understand that you are able to come in and you are taught to learn to navigate a different world, and you have to learn to communicate. And as I went into college, I became much more assertive, and I decided, I'm gonna be grounded on like what I know and some of the values that I was raised with. And I came from a very artistic family from Mexico City. I noticed in going to college, university, that there were very few Chicano professors, very few Latino professors, especially women professors. And I noticed the same when I went into the art world. A really important, I think, turning point was, again, when I was working in Juribaca. And as a Chicana, she talked about her struggles as a woman within the Chicano community that was, male muralist, and the struggles that she had fitting in. And as I progressed in my career, I'm now here as a professor. I felt that it was important for me to be a voice. I felt it was important to be creative in the way that I approach problems, because I think that's one of the big problems of the United States, or the way we do things, is that we are not very creative in the way we approach things. And I speak not only here as a professor, and I know that I love mentoring my students and working with my students, but another role that is very important to me here in San Diego is being one of the brown people voices in the arts community. And I think that's also something else to think about, that education and our colleges are part of society, but I'm also very, it's very important to me to also be a voice for other Chicano artists, African American artists, Asian API artists that are here in San Diego, because I share with them those experiences of being in the arts. So that's what I try to do. Here I serve on the City Arts Commission, I serve on museum boards, and I'm often the token brown person. I'm there to speak up, and I'm there to say, here we got to think a little bit about inclusion and diversity and all of those things that we're.
Thank you for sharing that. If I'm honest, I never imagined myself working in education. If you would have spoken to me when I was a little girl, I wanted to be president. I wanted to be a district attorney. I wanted to enforce the law. So I never imagined myself working in education at all, but I remember when I was a little girl, I was like 5, and my mom would say, "Parece que tienes el micrófono en la boca," because I was loud without trying to be loud. But then something happened to me when I was 9. I was sexually molested, and so my voice went away. And so there was other changes. I always was very girly and dresses and necklaces and all that, but that happened to me when I was 9. For like 3 years, I only wore shorts and pants. And, I didn't tell anybody at school, I didn't tell my teachers. And I became shy. All of a sudden, I was quiet. And so, no, I never thought I would work in education, but I can say that there was teachers, educators, leaders in our schools that inspired me, impacted my life. we didn't involve them in what happened, but my eyes were opened up that, you know what? I used to think I was perfect. You know, I grew up in a loving home. My mom divorced my dad when I was born, and so he divorced the whole family. And so I grew up handmade, homemade, you know, my money was tight. But, you know, my mom's Mexican and she always, emphasized that we needed to get an education, that we needed to do our best, that we needed to present. I remember first grade and my homework was all wrinkly and she scolded me and then she ironed my homework. It was just once, but that stood in my mind. Or like, you know, your work reflects you, you know? So I grew up with that kind of training, or like, give your best. And so I never imagined I would work in education until I started working in higher education. And so I realized I used to work with families through nonprofits, through ministry, out of work. So I would have a full-time job and then weekends and evenings I would do ministry with families that were hurting, like we were. And but once I started working in higher education, I felt like I was doing my purpose, fulfilling my purpose 24 hours a day. You know, I felt so excited getting ready to go to work because every day there's new things. There's new situations, there's new challenges, and just being able to be there for the students and support them in their educational journey. So I really didn't expect to work in education, but I'm grateful to be part of not only higher education, but DEBER. You know, we are working in developing effective bilingual educators with resources, you know, and we're hoping that, you know, teachers are not just gonna come into the classroom and teach a subject, but they're actually gonna impact lives. So, thank you.
It's a lot of stuff to follow up, be the last one. You know, I was thinking about this question earlier today, and I was remembering that, although I only met my grandmother a few times, the story that it was that she dropped out of school in the 3rd grade at the age of 8 to go work in the fields. And then at the age of 13, she met my grandfather, who was almost 30 at the time, who thought that her parents were very pretty, decided that he was going to marry her. So the priest married, that's like a 30-year-old and a 13-year-old, which is a couple generations of change. When I see some of your guys, talk to your grandparents, they got stories like this too. And so eventually, you know, my mom was born. When my mom graduated from high school, the counselor told her that she was too stupid to even pick up trash. And so I, this past spring, finished my doctorate in education. And so I look at 3 generations that it's taken to go from a 3rd grade dropout, field worker, to a professor with a doctorate. And my mother always just taught me, just keep your head down, be quiet, do your work. And so if I was gonna see how I'm gonna define myself as an educator, I would be like the foundation, piso, I would be the floor. I was taught that let them cover you up with rugs and furniture, you just be the floor. Let them build upon you. And so, you know, when it comes to all of these other things, beautiful stories from everybody, I was always taught, just be the floor. Keep your head down. And if you just work hard enough, eventually you'll have the opportunities. And so what I look at with DEBER, and I look at all the work that I've done as an educator, it really comes from this idea with my mother being Catholic, or, you know, stereotypical, I guess. Thinking about vocation, or vocación, like in this older Latin Catholic sense, that this is something that comes from who you are, your soul. So I think in her mind, when I became a teacher, that was something that I was born to do, that I was destined to do, whether I was teaching carpentry or pipe fitting in the shipyards, or I was coaching soccer, or whatever it was, that my vocation, that I was going to be a teacher. And in doing so, I saw myself, and I still do see myself, más como un piso que el edificio. And so when I look back even deeper with that, and I told this story a number of times, some of you are going to go to San Diego State University, and there's a parking structure back there, parking structure 12, it's in the back. When I was 18, 19 years old, I was a laborer and I helped build that. And I still have my boots because I was also taught that every man needs a pair of boots. And so I kept my boots, resold them, because we're poor, you resold them for half the price of the cost. So I have these beat up old boots that I had when I worked construction. And one day I was standing there as a student now at San Diego State, and I parked there and I was walking across the bridge and I realized I recognize this place where I recognize it. And I turned around and I looked at it and I said, oh shit, I worked on the building, I helped build this place. So back in May when I graduated, my wife took me there. I have a picture of me and all of my doctoral regalia standing on the bridge of the parking structure that I at one time I helped with. And so I look at myself as the foundation of piso. I said piso, and that in doing that, the next generations can build upon what we laid down. And that's how I see it. If anything else, that's my response.
Is it working? Okay, thank you so much for sharing. I think we can all agree that Chicanismo in general is such a powerful identity. I feel like it's us, la raza, like como dice Bad Bunny, o sea, nosotros tenemos el sazón. So, I grew up just like everybody telling me, telling myself too, I'm not American, like as an undocumented person, siempre te dicen, ni de aquí ni de allá, because you're not American, legally, you're like, lived all your life here. But if you go to Mexico, because you've never been there, you're not part of Mexico either. So what are we? We're Chicanos, whether you're a Chicana, Chicano, Chicanx, you're part of this. Part of being Chicano is your identity, and I'm so proud that you guys are speaking up on this and providing a very inclusive environment for everybody here who is part of the Chicano community. I think that it's your testimonios that is what's changing the face of education. So I'm curious to see, what made you go into the education field? What is the biggest challenge in your field in the past, and the movement for Latinx community in education?
All right, well, I just me a little bit more. I feel like I should put a timer on it. Same class, trying to keep track of the time. Well, it's a bit of a strange journey, but, because I was one of those students. Maybe some other people can relate to this. That in high school, nobody ever talked to me about going to college. Oh, I take that back though. I went to an Upward Bound meeting once. And then I never went back, and they never asked me to come back. So and then I went to a mentor meeting in San Diego State, probably like in 1985, but I mostly moved to and then when I graduated high school, I was one of the few people of all my friends and the people that I hung out with who actually graduated. There were about 5 of us. Out of those 5 of my close friends from my grade, I was the only one to survive, still be alive, or not go to prison. And so that was an accomplishment. I wasn't planning to go to college at all. I went to go work. And then in June 2nd of 1990, a good friend of mine was gonna come live with us. My mom always took it. People, we were like an unofficial foster family, like everybody that needs a place to live, they just come live with us. My mom took everybody in. So my friend, he was up off of Beverly Boulevard up in Los Angeles. And he was familiar with like the Rockwood neighborhood outside of West LA. This would change a lot in the last 30 years, but he was going from his home to Union Station down in downtown LA. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, didn't make it. He was shot 3 times in the head, and it was in a coma for 3 weeks. So my mother, when he died, my mom decided that we gotta do something. Otherwise, it was that like, yeah, guy, right? So she, you gotta do something. So I went to college, so she forced me, like, you're gonna go to school, you're gonna go to school, so I decided, okay, fine, I'll go to Southwestern College, because we lived in the Shoulders at the time. And, I had to keep dropping out, going to work, and eventually got injured working in the shipyards and in construction. Let's go get a job at the Chula Vista Elementary School District in the facilities department. And, I couldn't pass the physical, not because I passed everything else, I couldn't sign the papers, but I couldn't pass the physical because of injuries. And so the person at HR said, hey, you know what, we see that you're gone to Southwestern College, and you did pretty good. Would you be interested in becoming an instructional aide? It's like instructional aide, and I'm gonna be honest, like I was drinking a 12-pack every day, smoking a pack of cigarettes, and I was one of those stereotypical, get into bar fights, things like that, that's how I was. So the idea of going and becoming a teacher or a teaching assistant and working with kids is very, very foreign. Like, probably gonna mess these kids up more than I'm gonna help. But what it ended up being, because I accepted it, is I really got along with a lot of the parents and understood that we're working class mentality. You know, I still have a garage full of pool. People, you know, at the age of 15, I, you know, worked with my friend's dad who did irrigation, he dug ditches, put in, you know, landscaping, things like that. And so I really, really got along really well with the families that I worked with. So that eventually led me to become a teacher. And that goes back to, you know, the other part that I said earlier about being the foundation. That sometimes, you know, these families, they just need to know that somebody understands, or at least somebody's willing to listen if they don't fully understand, or they're willing to meet them where they're at. And there's a common phrase in education, to meet them where they are. To meet students where they are. And people often mean that the students have to come all the way to you to really meet you where you are, and then you meet them halfway. But what really it should mean, what I came to find out in all these years, is that sometimes you have to go all the way to them. And so when I would go do parent-teacher conferences at the Burger King over by NASCO on second shift at 7 o'clock at night, because that's when the dad could actually get out of NASCO for 20 minutes to just sit there and talk. Or picking somebody up and taking them to school, or doing things like that, really meeting people where they are, to really meet them where they are. And I find that really that became the big thing. When it comes down to what it means to get into education, why I became it, and what I still try to do, what we're trying to do with DEBER, is to do that. We have a number of students in DEBER that you're over 30, you have children, you're coming back to school after a long period of being gone. You don't feel that you have the skills in school, but then later you find out that you're really smart. You support each other, and to find out that you have a community and that you are capable. And that develops over time. Meeting you where you are means that you have to be given that time to develop that. And if nobody ever believes in you to begin with, and nobody ever gives you that opportunity to begin with, you're never going to take the first step. And one thing that we really believe in DEBER, but I believe in my heart and my soul for all of you, that sometimes we have to go that, not just in one extra step, but sometimes we have to go 2 extra miles to be able to meet you where you are. So you can start to take that first step. And more than anything else, that's there you go. Let's keep talking. Sorry.
A student gave me this, and I've never been a teacher in a classroom setting. It's been outside of public education, it's been church. But in higher education, one of the students brought this to me and said, this is great. And it just said, teachers are a work of art. And so I was that student, like I said, when I was 9 to 12, or like the very hard moments of my life where I just felt a lot of despair, a lot of hopelessness, powerlessness. And so, but I was one of those kids that got picked up by my teacher, 5th grade. I remember my mom was going to Southwestern College, and she had bought groceries for the whole month. She had got her textbooks for the semester, and she forgot something, so she stopped at the corner store. And when she comes back, the car's gone. And I'm saying this is a single divorced young mom with 4 kids. At the time, she was undocumented. And so it was hard. It was hard to make ends meet. So I don't know why, we just couldn't arrange the bus to meet me somewhere and, you know, walk to the bus stop. No, I got picked up by my teacher, my 5th grade teacher, for weeks, and she crossed the border. She lived in TJ. She would cross the border, she would come real early with her rollers in her hair still. She was so young and beautiful, you know, getting married that year, but she would pick me up for weeks. Nobody in my class knew what this teacher was doing for us. And then we still didn't have a car after a week, so a 6th grade teacher, I was in 5th grade. 6th grade teacher ended up saying, well, I have a second car, parked in the garage, you know? So we drove the 6th grade teacher's old Volvo for months. And so talk about struggles. My oldest, my only brother got into trouble. And so he was in jail for 4.5 years. And for I don't know what reason, I didn't do anything, but I felt shame. I felt pain that we had to go visit him in a facility. That you have to be searched, even though you're a kid. So that painful experience, and my mom would visit him all the time, and we went along. And so that was very painful. So like I feel for people that are in prison and on the streets, in trouble, but my heart breaks for the kids. I know the pain. So again, it's teachers that have done what's not expected of them, or they stepped in, or they didn't know about my brother being in jail, they didn't know about me being molested, they didn't know, but the obvious, or like, oh, they don't have a car, you can't get to school, how can you help? You know, and so, and then as I continued and I finished college and I graduated and I started working and making good money, but you know, what I was doing was impacting lives directly. So I'm grateful, you know, I was able to see, like I said, a VP in student services, that she would advocate for the students. She would fight for the students. Her door was always open, and it would come and open up to her. There was other VPs, and it was more of a title for the money position. But with her, it's like she was, you know, like the mother. She was shepherding, she was taking care, she was defending, she was providing, she was always, you know, and so when I saw that, I'm like, oh, I can do this. I can actually work, get paid to make a difference in other people's lives. To help, you know, students like I was, you know, achieve a goal, an educational goal, become something. So again, this is how I came into education. Just seeing people, teachers, leaders, administrators making a difference. So thank you.
I think I initially thought of the path to education because I was very selfish and I just wanted to be an artist. And my mother told me, you're gonna starve if you're an artist. And so I figured, well, if I become a professor of art, I won't starve and I still will be able to make my art. So I think, you know, that's kind of a unique position. And I studied art at UCLA. And I had only one professor, I had two professors who were Latino, Chicano. Robert Montes, who's a painter, and Victor Torrell, who was working in the Chicano art resistance and affirmation exhibit. And definitely, you know, being a Chicano at that time at UCLA, you were on the outside. And if you were in the arts, you know, Chicano art was considered ghetto art. And so it was very difficult being a student because you weren't getting all the support. And they would always tell you things like, don't paint like a Chicano artist, or don't use red colors, or don't incorporate your Mexican heritage or your Chicano heritage into your work. So I had to be pretty stubborn. And I kept getting seen because I wasn't doing what they were telling me to do. And my friends would be like, you're so, I mean, you don't care? And I'm like, no, I don't care. I'm gonna be authentic to what I believe. And I don't care what they have to say. And so when I graduated from UCLA, I went to work with Judy. And I realized that, you know, teacher school, you know, UC school, I had never been taught any skills that were useful in their course. I never been taught like work skills, like, writing a press release, presenting, looking for money, looking for grants, writing a budget. All of those things that are really necessary in the real world were completely absent from the education. It was very much focused on, yes, you learn the skills, you learn to paint, you learn to do this, you learn the history, but there were a lot of things that were left out. And so it was a big question for me, what is education for? Yes, of course, when I introduce students, I have a big passion for art. One of the reasons I love Chicano art is because it communicates ideas and it tries to change the world, through art. And so I think that's so important and an important value. Some art can also be very personal. But I think that what was lacking from that education is that it didn't give the students the skills to succeed. I'm probably one of the few students from my cohort who works in the arts, right? And who has a job, like being a curator and working in the arts. So I decided, and I was upset about that. I was upset. I felt like I was cheated. And luckily I didn't have to pay a lot for my education at the UCs. But imagine a student that comes out of school right now and pays like hundreds, it's so much money and goes into debt and you're not given those skills. So this is what I became really passionate about when I was hired here in this program. I was going to give my students in the Museum Studies program, but also I think I talk about that in Chicano art, but I was going to give the students those skills that will get them those jobs. Even get them those jobs right from community college and get them in the right. So that's what I'm passionate about. And also because, as I mentioned, being that the art world is not very diverse, to have students here at community college who come from all different backgrounds, older students, younger students, but many of those students who are representing those groups that are not visible and that don't have that access, to give them, to be able to provide those tools and that guidance and that networking and those connections is really important. And I'm just always proud to see my students succeed. And looking back, I have 150 students that I still keep in touch with who are working in the arts today and are changing the face of the arts today. So yeah, maybe not so focused in Chicano, but definitely as part of it.
Okay, my story is actually very similar to Alessandra's in terms of how I got into the education field. I wanted to be a writer. When coming out of high school, I thought I was going to be an amazing novelist, and so that's what I was focusing on. And if you're going to be an amazing writer, the first thing you realize is that you can't live off that, right? Very few writers can live off of their writing, so I knew I had to do something else in order to live off of that. So for me, it was to become a professor. I could teach at a college, I could teach creative writing, and then I could use my salary and then take the time and I could write my own poetry and write my own novels. But I think two things happened. Like the first thing that happened was that while I was going to college, and I mentioned this before, right? I realized that my history, my story, my experiences, the voices of my community were not in the curriculum at all. So if I wanted to study about my history or my culture, I had to take those extra steps and do it on my own. I could take an English or an English course, I could take a literature course, but if I wanted to read about Chicano authors, then I had to, on my own, find those authors, read about them, and then write about them in that literature course that I was taking. Same thing with the theater course, right? And so I think because of that, we started to grow a passion for, I guess what you could call Chicano studies, even though I think at that time I didn't realize that that's what I was thinking about. But I started to grow a passion for trying to find how to, first of all, find those voices of my community and my culture, but how do I get those voices into the classroom that I'm taking, right? And how do we begin to teach those voices in the classroom as well? So I think my own search for my community's voice while I was going to college gave me a passion for Chicano studies. And again, I didn't think about it as Chicano studies at the time, but I think that's what was beginning to happen. This was back in the early 90s. So Chicano studies programs, for the most part, didn't really give you influence. There were very, very few of them. There were very few Chicano studies programs that were offering bachelor degrees. So even if there were Chicano studies programs, they were only offering like certificates. And at that point, we had a single Chicano studies program that's offering PhDs and masters. So if we wanted to study our culture, our history and people's lived experiences, we had to do it on our own. So I went to college kind of with that perspective. I did get a Master of Fine Arts in creative writing, so I did fulfill that poetry, desire that I wanted to. I ultimately did publish a book of poems through a press called Calaca Press, which by the way is how myself and Michael over here are connected. He published a book with Calaca Press as well. So I managed to publish my poetry, but I think by then I was really much more passionate about Chicano studies and about establishing Chicano studies in colleges. So my first job as a full-time professor at Boston Community College was in the English department, but I spent much of my time trying to create a Chicano studies program there. And the biggest struggles with that was not just simply trying to get the administration to go with creating a whole new program, but the biggest struggle was that I was trying to get what was really good respect or credibility, even from my own peers, right? So even in my own faculty colleagues would not see Chicano studies as a valid form of studies or as something that should be taught at the colleges. And so in a lot of ways, the struggle for Chicano studies was just to validate, just to say our history, our stories, our experiences are worthy to be taught and worthy to be discussed at the college level. So I think by the time I was working at Boston Community College, that became my emphasis. I was blessed, and I said this yesterday, right? I was blessed because at San Diego Mesa College, they had a Chicano studies program already established. In fact, here at San Diego Mesa College is one of the oldest California community college Chicano studies programs, established way back in 1964. And in 2007, they opened a position where they wanted to hire a Chicano studies professor to teach specifically English composition courses. It was made for me. That position was made for me. And so I applied for it, got it, and was able to come here and become a part of the Chicano Studies program here. I should say, even though I am now a part of the Chicano Studies program, the struggle for Chicano Studies continues, right? Even here in California, where Chicano Studies programs exist, where you can find them in not virtually every community college, but I think about 30 to 40 community colleges, there are Chicano Studies programs here in California. There has still been a very, very hard struggle to see Chicano Studies as a valid form of study. I don't know if you guys are all familiar with it now, but just this year, they made ethnic studies programs a general requirement. So if you're going to get your bachelor's degree, you have to take now either the Chicano studies, Black studies, Native American studies, Asian American studies course. And the same thing's going to happen for your AA. Beginning next year, to get an AA, even an ADT, you will have to have taken either a Chicano studies, Black studies, Native American studies, Asian American studies course. So for me, that's in some ways, finally, the validation that we've been looking for with Chicano studies. And I get to say that I'm very proud that I was very much a part of that struggle, those efforts. The work that we did here with my colleagues here in the Black Studies and Chicano Studies program, the work that we did at the statewide level. Now Chicano Studies is seen as a valid discipline. We, in the last year, we have hired more Chicano Studies and Black Studies professors than we have in the entire history of the community college system. And for the first time, again, every single student is going to have to take our course. So for me, that's the kind of like, what's the culmination, if you will, up to now. Of that moment when I was at the high school library looking at La Raza books and reading the stories. And from there to now, right? That's what my journey has been. It's been an amazing journey.
Thank you. We have two more questions. So, what has your experience been like growing up within the Latino and Chicano community? And did you have any struggles attending school, such as not being able to relate to a teacher because they did not understand your backstory or your background?
Okay, I'll go with this one. We're short on time, so I'm gonna try to make my story short. I think I'll focus specifically on my experiences growing up as a Chicano in education specifically. Growing up as a young Chicano, specifically in Springs, California, and I mentioned to you before, right? As I was growing up, I didn't feel American. Certainly going to the public schools in Springs, California, that was amplified even more. I felt even less American within the public schools. I don't know if it happens today, though. I know that growing up for me, we definitely were what we called it trapping, right? But we were definitely throughout the course of going to school, we were ultimately discouraged from studying, or we were discouraged from studying certain types of fields, and we were pushed or trapped, is the word they use, into other different specific types of fields, right? So many Chicanx students would be encouraged by their professors or by their instructors to take a woodshop class, or take a mechanics class. I don't even know if those existed, right? And I don't want to take away from the great value of mechanics and right? But back when I was growing up, the assumption was that if you were Chicano, then that's what you were going to take, right? You weren't going to go on to college. You weren't going to, become a doctor or a lawyer. You were going to become a mechanic. You were going to become a carpenter. You were going to work in construction, right? And so many of us were trapped in that direction. I resisted that. I specifically did not enroll in those courses, even though my counselor constantly tried to enroll me in those courses specifically. The other thing was that once you enrolled in those courses, you were removed from the campus because those courses happened at a separate campus, and you would spend half the day at the mechanic shop or at the wood shop or at some other area. So you were completely removed from the whole academic experience. And that was something that I struggled with constantly. But I constantly had teachers, I think the best way to put it is teachers had very low expectations and constantly reminded me of the low expectations that they had. I remember my biology teacher, my senior year of high school, said, "Hey, your senior year, what are you going to do after you graduate? You can have all this extra time on your hands." And I said, "I'm going to go to college." Right. And I'll tell you what he said, even though I have to kind of give you some context here. He said, "Oh, community college, right?" Now, he was right. However, the tone in his voice was not, "Cool, you're gonna start at a community college, that's a great place for you to get going and for you to move on." It was more like, "Yeah, that's what's expected of you, right? You're not gonna go to university, you're gonna go to community college, you're probably gonna fail from there." But was more the message that he was giving, right? So even though it was correct that my intention was to go on to community college, I think the idea, the tone behind that statement was more again of, you're not worthy enough to go on to a university. Even when I went to the community college, I remember my first year there, you have to take a placement test. You also have to take a placement test, right? To get your first English composition course. We still have to do that, right? Back when I was going to college, we still had those basic skills and reading courses, right? And the first thing you did when you enrolled in college was you took a placement test. You took a math placement test, you took an English placement test, and those would place you wherever you were supposed to be based on your level. Now, I've always loved reading, and even though I was we use the word Mesa, I was a terrible student in high school, I've always excelled in English. So I knew I was gonna ace that English placement exam, and I did, I aced it. And I got placed right into the upper level credit English course. And when I went to go speak to the counselor who was supposed to make up my schedule, he looked at that test score and he was surprised. He said, "Wow, you really aced that score." And then immediately without thinking said, "You're gonna fail the class." Didn't even think about it, just said that immediately. And here's me, I'm like this 18-year-old kid looking at him like, I had no idea how to respond, only to say, "I'm gonna take the class anyway." And I took the class, got an A, never saw that counselor again. But I think that for me is the most common experience, right? Growing up as a Chicano within the school, this system, for me there was never any expectation of me to succeed academically. And there was every expectation of me to just simply become another part of the blue collar world, and that's it. And again, no shame, right? Blue collar work is good work, but there's an expectation that because we're brown, that's what we're doing.
So, yeah, throughout my experience in school, I did experience a lot of, racism. Some of it was, probably experiencing sometimes because of class, sometimes, yes, because they see you as Chicano. For me, a lot of it was because I had an accent. So that means I was not smart enough, or I was not, in my English, if you have an accent, then your English is not good enough. Even if you are a great writer and a great speaker, and if you speak two languages, it's like seen as worse than if you just speak English, right? And you speak English perfectly. So I did experience a lot of that, especially because I immigrated here as a teenager, so I couldn't get rid of my accent. My sister was 12, she got rid of her accent, but she did really well. So I remember I was actually a very good student. For me, school was my escape. When my parents moved to LA, they divorced, and it was very hard for me, and I remember going to school and holding back my tears and not being able to tell anybody what was going on at home, and the whole house falling apart, and not having family or friends or anybody to go to. And so for me, school was like my escape. I did great in school because that's what I had control over. I didn't have control over anything else. I didn't choose to come here. I didn't like it. I hated, LA. I didn't like my school. I didn't connect with a lot of people, but I was great at doing my homework, at, paying attention. And I remember I had basically a 4.0, and I graduating high school. And I was good at art, and I remember the counselor telling me, oh, yes, you're good at art. I'm not even looking at my transcript or my grades. I'm just telling me you should go to cosmetology school. I mean, not even mentioning college or university as an option. Because, yeah, this is what, you're good at art. This is all that you can do. And I mean, it would be fun to be at cosmetology. That's not bad. But so I had to really fight for it myself. And I have to tell you, my parents didn't care so much about university or college. Not because I think I'm kind of weird place, because my parents were in Mexico and they were educated and they were successful in their fields in the arts, but they didn't have to have a university education to be successful. They were able to be good at what they did just from learning from doing it. So for them, if I went to university or college, they didn't really care. They thought, oh, you could do whatever you want. So I was really driven, and because I also was undocumented, I ended up in community college. And I think every time a teacher told me you can't do this, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna do it better than anybody else. So actually, that kind of anger that I got from being discriminated against fueled me to just succeed. So that's also, I think, an interesting way of some people react to things like that. And so I guess that's, at UCLA, the same. I had some great teachers, great professors, but I had a lot of obstacles too with people telling me, don't do this or don't do that. So that still encouraged me to do what I wanted.
Thank you. For me, school was my happy, safe place as well. I love school. I feel like I'm fish in water, I'm learning. And so that was my happy place. And my mom is Mexican and she's dark skinned, and she felt discriminated against in her own family because some were those light skinned and some were dark. And my mom was like one of the darker ones. And so we lived in a family where, my mom's family, they all came from she came from a very educated background, she had a family of 14 siblings, and most of them are either lawyers or psychologists or doctors, or, they're all educated. And here's my mom where she's divorced with 4 kids, struggling in the US. So our upbringing was, my mom, the expectation she had for us as far as schoolwork, it was like, you have to do your best. You have to be your best, everything represents who you are. And so I grew up very performance driven, and, 4th grade, they tested me for GATE, and I was tested into GATE, but the school didn't have it. So what they did is it was kind of like a teacher's aide, 4th grade on, until I was actually able to do honors in middle school and high school and AP, but school has always been my safe place. And as far as the culture and the language, my mom didn't instill in us the love of being Chicanos or Latinos or anything. She was like, Mexican, Mexican. And you're going to speak Spanish, I want you to speak it properly. She was an editor, so she was very hard on us as far as, communicating the right way and not mixing the languages and all that. But one thing I can say is that I was raised with that pride that, it's not something to hide or be embarrassed of, but be proud of who you are, and your Spanish, your language, and your culture is an asset. So I'm grateful for that. That's all I have to say.
Alright, so in the interest of time, I'll just keep it as short as possible. Great stories from everybody. Mine is a little different because a single mom, I had to kind of be the pseudo dad for my brother. And I was really angry about that in some ways, because I didn't just get to be a kid. And honestly, by the time I was in middle school, I was already getting drunk and getting high and all that kind of stuff. I was that much. So I always tell people, like, I never had a drug problem because I had no problem doing drugs. And it took a while for me to kind of swing around and get things back. And so, you know, I know there's a lot of people, there's a lot of people who feel like, oh, there's a struggle and struggle and struggle. And I didn't really have that. I just kind of went with the flow. I got high. I had girlfriends. I hung out. I did my thing. And when teachers didn't like me, it was like, I think it's character, you know? And I actually probably never would have even graduated high school if it wasn't for Elizabeth Ruiz, who was an art teacher. I took art classes, and she had me be in her class and in a classroom assistant for probably like 3 or 4 classes from my senior year, so she could give me straight A's, just so I could make the minimum 2.0 GPA. I graduated with a 2.3 GPA, 2.03 GPA from high school. And so, you know, as much as people probably didn't care, I mean, I got busted, so I had a suspended sentence, and the student, and the VPs and the principal of the school wanted to kick me out. And I realized that if I got kicked out of school, then I have to get locked up, so I tried to do that. So, you know, my situation was a little bit different, and it wasn't until, you know, my friend was murdered, and I went to community college. I walked into a classroom, Gene Clark at Southwestern College, and he wrote up on the board a question, and the question was something, it's not exact, but it's something similar, and it asked, is the ability to use the English language a mark of intelligence? And it wasn't that there was a right or wrong answer for that, maybe in his mind, maybe there was, but it opened up a discussion, an open-ended question. We had this amazing discussion in the very first day of class, and I realized this is where I want to be. And so part of like the earlier times, I talked with some students on the DEBER Scholars, and told about my 4th grade teacher had a barber strap in her front on her desk that she would whip kids with for talking Mexican. So I kept the class very quiet. Things like that. And those are really common occurrences. That was in Yuma, Arizona. But really, I don't know, I can complain about, maybe this is from my mom keep telling me to keep my head down. I can complain about everybody, but then I also have to realize that I was part of my own problem. It wasn't until I went to college that I realized, like, oh, I'm smart, maybe I can do this thing. So, there's my story on that.
So thank you again for serving as our panelists. I think everybody here has learned something and benefited from it in some way. I think you've all done a great job of reaffirming the importance of cultural values, self-awareness, and cultural diversity. So thank you. I'd like to open it up to the audience and see if anybody has any questions. Maybe.
Since this is Latin a Heritage Month, I just want to know, what does this month mean to you in one word for each of you?
Just one word.
One word. Make it hard.
2 words, be proud.
Yeah, I guess celebrate. Again, if I only have one word, I guess that would be it.
I would say share.
Beauty.
Is there any other questions that you guys would like to ask? Okay, with that being said, thank you for the microphone. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to the panelists. This has been one of my favorite events that we've done as a team. I really hope that you guys got something out of this. If you represent as Chicano, I hope that this brought a little bit more of community, and if you don't, I hope that you learned something and are able to uplift the Chicano community in your classes, in your work environment, anywhere that you see that minorities are not being treated fairly. But thank you so much. Grab some food, hang out, talk to our professors up here. But you guys are free to go.
Opposite what? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm also available on Monday, but it's what time are you? It's just, if you want to. No, yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, you know, the way I can. It's a good. You said, what was the last thing you said? If you want to get more papers. Now, so here's the preference. And then Linda is the administrator for the best program. Yeah, we do have pretty bad. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. One, two, wait.
Thank you so much. Oh.
Yeah. It's yours, but we cannot. That's one thing, right? Yeah, it's, yeah. That's fine, good. Just wanted to, sort of like, find somebody that's out the fire. You wanna,
Yeah.
I don't have a lot. Yes. We have so many.
And I was telling you, like, we should collaborate.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna spend them there all day, okay? But it's one of the people, like, no, it's actually more of our family because we do see a lot of people like that down school and knowing that. Give them a collaboration, and I thought hired. I was at the state, I was here, from the state, came back, so, yeah, kind of doing collaboration. I started.
Yeah.
Oh, I really know, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, I want to do one with, I was letting that I'm thinking of and then I want to do a lot of, yeah. With that, and then when I'm kind of with the Fight Center, doing them, kind of do, bring more awareness to the community, and a lot of them in their whole country because of safety, and then especially people who trust me, yeah, I have all these ideas. I don't, they haven't arrived yet. Yeah, I'm at the center, I'm the full-time, project. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Paola.